And this next segment is about organic marketing and how to make it meaningful, how to get data and content to blend, to come together, to indeed do organic marketing, whatever that means. We'll hear about it in a moment. Meaningful. And it's all called Transmedia, a new word that is going to be spelled out, explained to us, and hopefully at the end of the session, you will understand and make sense of it all. Andrea Isaac, Head of Strategy and Emerging Markets at Havas, has all the answers in terms of Transmedia. Andrea, welcome.
So when we were first asked to come and talk to you about something that we've been talking a lot about in the recent pitches and with some of our clients, which we call organic marketing, we wanted to take it a bit further. And we really became obsessed with understanding and discussing where communications were going to come next. And this challenge became even bigger once a client asked us, we want you guys to tell us what communications are going to look like in 2020 in Latin America. And with that said, we started looking at data and historical data and seeing how we could project how consumers were going to connect with each other, how they're going to use media. And then something happened. And the what wasn't the most important thing. The why and the how became extremely important. And that why and that how became what we called transmedia communications, which is how we can connect the way that we talk to consumers through each type of touch point. So it became born out of this idea that our CEO globally called organic marketing. And it's really how everyone in this room today is probably connected through what platform. I just want to see a very, very short raise of hands of who does not have Facebook, who does not have Twitter, who does not have LinkedIn. So one person, but you are one of our guests, so you don't really count. So the rest of us would at least be connected through one platform. And that's really the power of this interconnected world. When we talk about Facebook, we have to understand that today in Latin America, over 200 million people are connected through just that one platform. And when we see the amount of time we spend there, it is overwhelming. It is the one thing that we do most in this region, and it's compared versus any other region in the world. So that makes us have to change the way we think about consumers, because now they have more power. They have more power than ever. And we've talked about this idea of consumers having the power to choose, the power to say what they want, how they want it, the power to voice out their expressions. However, we've talked very little about what that means to brands and what types of questions brands need now to respond to. And in that sense, we say brands should respond to two questions. Why should I care? Why should I share? Why should I care about what you have to say, how you say it? And why should that incite me to share? To share your thoughts, to share your brands, to share my experiences with them. And when we think about that, and we think about that power and how we can ignite that power of conversations and connections, we come into a bit of a challenge. Today, there's a huge disconnect about what people think about brands and what brands want to tell them about. So today, people would not care if 73% of brands disappeared. So sorry to the big advertisers in the group. Your relationship is probably broken. And in Latin America, this is a huge challenge because people care more about brands, or at least they want to care more. So 82% of Latin Americans declare that brand should give them value. They should go a step further in what the product actually does and provide some sort of well-being. In order to do that, we need to understand what well-being actually means to consumers. So we started looking in Latin America at what were some of the big trends. What were some of the things that were really changing consumer behavior? And the first thing is urbanization. Today, Latin America is the second most urbanized region in the world. So if you think of advertisers and you think of us big brands, we usually think about, that's great, because it means focused distribution, it means focused advertising, it means less spend. If I'm a consumer, I think about, my city does not have well planning, which means if I now spend in Mexico City about an hour to get from my job to my house every night, I will probably spend about 2 in 2 years. So that actually changes the way we need to think about connecting with them. It changes the way that we think about touch points. So for this part in particular, when we think about out of home and mobile, and bringing them together would be essential. Another big thing that's happening in Latin America is a couple of years ago, we were the youngest region in the world. We're not that anymore. We have an aging population. As some of you might know, because we all experience it at some time, when we grow up, we become a bit more mature, at least we think so. And with that said, we become obsessed with information. We want to know everything before we make decisions, or at least some of us. And that means that search and Google will continue to rule the world. In Latin America, we're the #1 region in terms of searches per searcher, and this will continue to increase. And the third big thing that's changing the way we as consumers in Latin America interact and with brands is there's a big middle class that's growing. So household income has increased significantly throughout most of the countries in Latin America. This means that every day there are more brands entering the market, and there's more local brands going out of the market. So there's more choice. A lot of you women in here will probably agree with me that when we go to a restaurant and we get a menu, and it's a massive menu, we become a bit confused, and we become a bit emotional about why we pick a certain thing. So we end up picking something because someone tells us or because it reminds us of something good, which is the same thing that happens when we go to a massive supermarket and now we have 10 brands to pick from, where yesterday we had 2. So decisions on the spot become much more emotional. And here is where storytelling becomes extremely important. And video allows us to do that. And I'll talk about video not as TV, but video in general. And digital will become extremely important over the years. And then I've talked about video, I've talked about at home, I've talked about mobile, I've talked about search. So I've talked about various different touch points. That means that there's fragmentation. And we know this because actually right before I started presenting, ComScore was throwing a lot of stats at you, saying 50% of people now watch TV while they're watching digital. And that's actually true, and it's happening in Latin America. And with fragmentation, we need to become much better at grabbing the attention of consumers. And that has led to what we call a TV morphosis, which is that sense that today in Latin America, over 50% of time spent on a tablet, it's happening when you're in front of a TV. Or 30% of the time spent in front of your mobile is actually happening in front of a TV. So this idea of newer and bigger touch points, and the fact that they're more interconnected, and the fact that we use them simultaneously requires that we have a new approach to communications, a new approach to the way that we figure out who we need to target and how and why. And this is what we call, we need to become much better at data-driven, because that consumer lives a much easier to understand digital footprint, and now I can understand who he is, where he goes, where he spends that hour or 2 in traffic. And if I am better at content, and if I'm very, very, very good at that, then I can create what we call moments of magic. And those moments of magic need to be distributed in every single type of touch point. So before we used to think, okay, I'm a media agency, so I will go straight to paid. This is your budget distribution. You should have a lot of voice in TV, and then some things in digital to sort of spark it all up. Now we start backwards. We now think your brand and you need to establish that emotional connection. So we first need to understand what you have. We say the power is in the brand's hands. Your own assets are that power. When we understand that and we understand what your differentiator is, then we move to see what other brands can we leverage with? What other types of territories can we partner up with? And that's what we call shared. Because in today's world, you cannot win alone. And then we go back to this concept of the user has the power. And when we think about that, the user is really, the audience is the best media we could have. So how do we activate that touch point? And after we understood those three things, then we go into paid. And we go into paid and we don't spend less time thinking about paid and how many GRPs you should have and so forth and so on. But we do that afterwards because when we have thought about what your assets are, how we can empower people to do it, and what other brands we could leverage to make it sound better and stronger, then our paid efforts become much more effective. And with that, we say we need to build meaningful connections. We need to create that emotion that's data powered and driven by content. So with that said, I'm going to introduce some panelists that we have been very, very lucky to have with us. We have GapingVoid, which is a company that basically empowers meaningful conversations around organizational culture and building interesting relationships between content culture makers, art makers, marketing, and the overall business. And they've been very, very grateful, and they've created some amazing art for us. So you will see some cartoons. And how it will work, actually, is Hugh, who's the creative director and who made these graphics, and if you want to start coming up, he will actually mention what he thought about when he created it. And then we're going to have a little debate, and hopefully will get more interesting than me talking for the past 10 minutes, about what we think about it and what we agree and disagree on. So we have Hugh, who was able to make everything. And we have Jason, who's the CEO at GapingVoid. And we also have Matt. He's the head of brands at Myriad. And Myriad is one of our key partners. They're a tech company, and they are able to integrate brands within music shows and videos. You will be able to follow everything on Socialize Miami, so you will be able to have access to all this amazing art that he's going to talk about now if you follow us on Twitter or Instagram.
Should be on.
Does this work yet? Oh, hey, it works.
So, Hugh, what were you thinking when you drew this?
What was I thinking? Well, I live in Miami, and so 10 years ago, nobody in the global advertising business thought much of the South America. Now all of a sudden it's exploding, and it's and I got my training in both New York and London, and we knew about Asia coming up. We kind of knew about Africa and the Middle East, obviously the United States and Europe, but South America, what an amazing opportunity. And so and Central America and the Caribbean, but and also it's going to be, whatever, 40%, my wife's Hispanic. The United States are going to be 40% Hispanic in this century, at least.
So you could have drawn that with America in there.
Oh, yes, I could have, yeah. But I would have confused people.
So, cool.
So yesterday we were talking about this slide, and I made a comment that they have mocked me about, and I promise I would say it again. They were asking me why I thought there was a new superpower, and I said, well, you have a lot more income, and you have a lot of people. So if you have some territory that no one has really looked at, as he was saying, and now you have Brazil, which is a superpower by itself, and you have Mexico, which has a lot of people in a very, very small amount of space, anything you do could work. So he said he was going to debate me on that.
I'm from England, and I just thought it was a superpower because everyone's easy to work with down here, a lot more easy than Europe.
This is a cartoon I wrote 10 years ago. It says, the market for something to believe in is infinite. And I was still working in advertising back then, and I realized products don't interest us. What actually interests people is human potential. What we want to matter. We want to find meaning. And what we want are brands and people and businesses and movements and everything else that makes it easier for us to believe in our own lives and our own species.
So Hugh, would you say that stuff has replaced religion?
Stuff has replaced religion?
Yes.
No, I think religion is kind of fragmented into lots of other kind of meanings. But I think we're all looking for a higher meaning, and I think brands have to push themselves to always try to be meaningful, even if it's something protein like soap or toothpaste.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've done a lot, and I briefly went over that, is talked about globally about meaningful brands. And we do this study that really understands why people care and why people would care if brands were missed. And we look at every year, especially in Latin America, we saw a big change in the past couple of years of people caring about their personal well-being. So we understand three things. If the product actually delivers the promise that they're saying, so if it works, if it costs what it should, we understand how much personal well-being the product should provide me. Does it make me smarter, fitter, or at least think about it? I think about myself that way. And how much collective well-being it offers me. And what we see in Latin America is that personal well-being becomes much more important. Yeah. And I think that goes very much into what you were saying about the fact that we're looking for change in a meaningful way, and we're looking for brands to provide us with that.
Well, depending where you are on the globe, I mean, life has never been less cheap than it is now. Life was, anyone watch Game of Thrones? That's a good history lesson. Life was very cheap back then, you know. So, and now it's not, and that's going to change it.
You know, there's an element to this, you know, and this idea of meaningful brands where we are defined by what we consume, by what we wear, by what we drive, by what we drink. And it is worked its way to the fabric of society. So meaning is taken on a whole different view.
Yes, I understand, but brands help us define our own personal narratives. It's all about us. It's not nothing, you know. And that's what's interesting is this meaning that. Sorry to hark on about meaning the whole time, but that's why we're here. Sorry. In life. This was a cartoon I did, I don't know, 10 years ago. It just said, "Welcome to Nobody Cares, population 6 billion," although it's actually 7 billion. I think we forget, anybody in communication, marcoms or advertising, communications, PR, is we forget the basic default mode of other people's indifference, and we forget that people don't care about us. What they do care about is themselves, and it's probably the easiest thing to forget when you're in this business.
I think that it's not that people don't care. I think one of the things that we've talked about before, and especially in Latin America, people do care about brands.
Is it they don't listen? Is that
exactly.
a title?
I think it's more about the fact that they want to be perceived as they want to be cared for, and brands are not listening and acting in a way that the people feel that. But people do want to care.
People are passionate about brands.
Yes.
I loved Lego when I was 4 years old, and I still do today. I mean,
yeah, people love brands until they change their mind. I mean, it's not
so what about the guy that gets the Harley Davidson lover that gets a tattoo? I mean, that's a passionate guy. He loves that brand.
But you mentioned Harley Davidson, which is a very archetypal brand, but it's.
So we don't talk about that one then.
No, well, it matters to them because it reflects something that matters to them inside themselves. So there's give and take. So. Right. Complexity and clarity. This was about organic marketing. When I went into the advertising business in the early 90s, you had like TV, radio, outdoor magazines, newspapers, that's about it. And media was like this thing that you called up your 5 best buddies and bought media once a month, and now it's kind of completely fragmented. And social media, the actual building blocks of social media are like really, really simple, like Twitter, like LinkedIn, like Pinterest, like whatever. And that's not the hard part. The hard part is getting them all to fit together. And that's where the clarity in social media comes from.
So when I saw this, I thought it was about data.
Me too.
And data.
And data. I thought this is like Havas is data-driven content powered.
Yeah.
And the saying that if content is king and context is queen, then data's the new princess.
Yeah, and data, and well, data is actually, at the elemental level, fairly straightforward. It's ones and zeros. But it's all, the hard part is how you manage them.
Yeah, so when I saw this first, and the reason why I love this is I thought it's algorithms. It's how everything is related to faster and automated decision making. I think that we talk a lot about big data and what we can do with it and how we can now have massive sets of data which we can organize in a million ways, and it can tells us a million things. But I think that the important thing with it is how do we use it to make decisions on the spot. And to me, that's what this tells us, that this is me having some sort of understanding about the Facebook user and how he now loves this and that, and how the person that likes my brand, it does not like any other type of brand, et cetera, et cetera. But when I think of clarity within a data-driven world, I think about how that makes me become faster and more effective at making decisions of how I want to reach them or what things I need to communicate with them and so forth and so on.
Like what Facebook launched a couple of days ago with...
Exactly.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. That's possible because of the data.
Yeah, the power comes from contextualizing data, not from actually having it, because data is ubiquitous now. So, but it's what you can own is how you contextualize it.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it interesting. That's what makes it... Okay. Next one. Oh, this one. Yeah, it says, I know, let's replace our paying customers with big data. I spent a lot of time in the tech world, and the trouble with the tech world, they forget about, they're so enamored with the tech, they often forget about there's actually people at the end of it. And there's a lot of, and there's a lot of companies that just think that the product is enough because it has big data, or the design is enough. But actually what matters is people. What matters in our what matters in any business are paying customers. What matters is love. Who loves you? Who talks about you? Who shares with you? Who matters to you? Do you matter to them back? Stuff like that. And this is just a snarky way of talking about. Don't forget, it's about people. It's about people, everybody. And it's too easy to forget that we're in a very human business, in spite of the fact that all this data is kind of. We're learning how to manage, but it's, at the end of the day, the same problems remain.
So when I saw this, I thought about organizational change. I thought about how in today's, and I know there's a lot of agencies here, how we have a data analytics team or a research team or whatever you call it, and then we have a strategy team, and then we have a content team, and then we have a client services team, and then we have a lot of teams, and they rarely or sometimes not talk to each other. And when we think about big data, then we think that's the responsibility of the data people, of those people that know codes and those people that think in a way I can never think about anything. And then you have the people. And those are my salespeople. These are the ones that are in the client services team, or these are the ones that are in the strategy team, or these are the people that can actually relate to others and talk in a way that others can understand. And what's important in today, when we think about big data, is how we merge those two. So not just from a technology perspective, not only about how I can develop platforms that allow me to understand this data in a way that allows me to make those decisions that I was talking about before, how I can actually humanize the data to make my consumers feel that they're not just cookies, but also how it needs to shift, or we need to shift the way we think about it from an organizational perspective. How the people that talk about data are not just the data people, they're everyone. And the people that talk about people are not just the people, but everyone. So we need to start talking, I think, much more about people data and how people data is at the core of every single part of our organization.
But do you think agencies get too obsessed with data? Because I work for a startup, and I'm selling to you.
Yeah.
And I sometimes don't have the money to spend on the data that I'd love to have. But you guys need it to sell to your clients.
Yes. So I think it's good to be obsessed with data, to a point.
To a point.
To a point. I think that it's easier for us to sell to the clients, and unfortunately we don't have a client here to back me up, but because it's easier for them to sell it to the decision makers within their organization. So data makes us feel comfortable. So yes, we are a bit obsessed with data, but at the same time, I think that what we previously thought of data is not what we think of data today. Before, when we talked about data about 5 years ago or 4 years ago, we were talking about research, and we were talking about, oh, how many viewers do you have in your channel, and all the amazing figures that we've seen a lot throughout the couple of days. And we're not just talking about that when we talk about data. We talk about how can we track and measure, and what happens afterwards, and how the afterwards can be optimized. So it's not just the pre, which I know you vendors are very obsessed with because you think you need that to sell, and we need that to sell. But it's the afterwards. It's how much are we investing as media, now technology companies, in optimizing, in tracking, in being much better at adapting those decisions that we first made.
So you're not going to give me a break then?
I will not give you a break.
Let's see. Yeah, this is just a cartoon about the horror of realizing that, you know what, your advertising is content too. I grew up in a time when sometimes the commercials were better than the programs, and now we're living in a golden age of television. I think we have to realize that when we create content, whether there's a sales message in it or whatever, is we're competing with The Sopranos, and we're competing with Breaking Bad. We're not just competing with Colgate and Procter & Gamble. And I think we have to remember that. And now content's king. We have to remember that we're content too.
But that's not a new theory, is it?
No, but it's one of those things that we love to forget easily and quickly. And we have to keep on reminding ourselves.
So nothing's ever changed?
Plus ça change, plus la même chose, is that how you say it?
Oui.
Yeah, you know, it's always kind of, we're always going to run up against the wall of our own humanity. And
so why do you think it hasn't changed?
No machine's going to solve that.
What's that?
Why do you think it hasn't changed?
Because the best content always won. So the great commercials, you know, I mean, when I was very little, you know, the Alka-Seltzer commercials from the early 70s or something.
Or the early Apple commercials were terrific.
You know,
not anymore.
But I think the issue now is that everybody's so focused on it. Everybody know the bar is quite high, right? Everybody, I think, was it Red Bull that changed the dynamic for everybody? It's all about, how good can you make it and how much you're going to throw at it.
So I do see a very subtle change. I think that when we talked about advertising as content a couple of years ago, we were mainly talking about how the commercials were great and how we would be able to make things that we couldn't think about before. And today, when we think about, or at least when I think about advertising as content, I don't think about the commercial at all. I think about native, and I think about how I can deliver experiences that then are moved through content and that people want to see and share and express. I think about brands are becoming entertainers. I don't think about the spot at all. And I think you probably agree with me on that one.
I absolutely agree with you. The company that I run integrates brands directly into video content, so there's an implied usage. It's the purest form of native advertising, which is why it's the most effective.
No, I mean, I understand that. I think it's for me as an artist, it's always the same collision between humanity and technology, and the thing is, the war never ends, the conflict never ends, the dynamic never ends, and frankly, it's what keeps this business interesting, because there's always going to be evolution against the backdrop of our own human nature, and that's what's interesting to me. Organic. We're talking about organic message. This is an idea I have for a T-shirt. Just in the United States, a silver bullet is something that kills everything with one shot. It's like a magic bullet that kills any enemy you have, and it's like the one bullet. But with organic marketing, advertising, there's no one thing. It's a constant juggling of all these different balls, and you have to get very, very, very good at keeping them up in the air. And you know, as time progresses, there's going to be even more balls in the air, and we're just going to have to get better at juggling. But that's a terrific opportunity to people who want to embrace it.
So when I saw this, I thought about how the way we used to sell things changed. So somebody made a comment not too long ago about how, yes, before, and in some markets still happens, where we sell an Excel for our media plan. And the client looks at it, sees how many TRPs, the level of reach, how the frequency, and then they say yes, no, because that's the benchmark we've had. And how we need to develop better KPIs now in order to understand what those benchmarks are. I think that with this idea of organic and merging technology and storytelling and data and content, there's really no solution. There will be ranges of KPIs and things like that, but the way that we think our process needs to change, our hiring needs to change, and how much we are willing to test needs to change. I think that a lot of our budgets, media budgets, go to the safe choice, and I think with this idea of organic every day more, we need to test.
So I live in Los Angeles, and I think if I see the word organic, I think in grocery stores, I think more expensive. So if I see organic in media, I think it's going to be more effective.
That's a really good point. Well, the thing is, we all live organically. That's why. We don't, you know, because we all live our lives one life at a time, and that's all we can do. Human beings don't scale, and that's why.
Maybe they do.
All right. This one, inorganic versus organic. When I was a kid in the advertising business, the agency I worked for, we sold Super Bowl ads. And then if the client didn't want to buy a Super Bowl ad, they bought something that looked like a Super Bowl ad. And it's like this one big campaign that was like, you know, just do it, come to where the flavor is, fly the friendly skies. This one big thing, you know, get famous film director to film it, you know, buy the Super Bowl, buy the biggest programs, just bulldoze the entire media landscape with your big idea. And actually, what works now isn't like one big idea, but lots of little ideas working contextually with each other. And certainly for like Havas or, you know, the big agencies like WPP, Interpublic, Publicis, all that, is how do you get the little modules to kind of work together, but also have their own little thing where it's very effective. Because if you just roll out the same commercial to billions of people at one time, it'll probably fail, or it'll be very expensive.
Organic just looks more fun.
Yeah, it's a lot more fun. It's more colorful. You know, you look at something like Nike. Nike had that big idea, just do it. But they also kind of implemented lots of little ideas, like lots of different commercials that look nothing like each other, lots of branding experiences, lots of website innovations, lots of people on the ground level tweaking away, doing their own thing, very different from anybody else, all under this one Nike umbrella, as opposed to everybody parroting the same Super Bowl commercial for 10 years and hoping nobody gets bored.
Is this about monologue versus dialogue then?
That too, yes, and it's lots of little interventions rather than one big intervention, I suppose.
So when I saw this, I thought, just bluntly, I have a 25 to 49 female target, and that is one big bulk of gray. And on the right, I have Mary and Sophia and Claudia and Anna and Mauricio. Well, Mauricio not because he's a boy. And I just said female. But it's how I see things, and I see a bulk of things, and I am able to just bring it all up and assume everything's the same. And when I think about organic, I am intrinsically saying we're different between one context. And that applies to the people I need to target, to the type of content I create. So it goes back to your idea of ideas, and I just have one big idea that's one size fits all, or I'm able to have one big strategic concept and take it down differently to the types of people that I wanna reach.
Yeah, and that's the agencies of the future who will win are the ones who will be able to go from inorganic to organic. And the ones who can, sorry, it's over, party over for us, for those folks. For sale, not for sale. You can buy eyeballs, you can't buy emotions. Again, it's an old truism in advertising, in communication. You can buy numbers, you can't buy people. They're not for sale.
Anyone that's been married knows which one of these is more expensive.
Yes, bravo.
So here's where we say that we buy reach, we don't buy engagement. And I think that a lot of agencies used to talk about the fact that through Facebook you buy engagement, and these are the platforms that you use for engagement. And in reality, when you're buying media, you're buying reach. But then you have to do other stuff, and that's why I talked about the own and the shared and the earned to get that engagement, so to get that heart.
The thing about real engagement is that is really messy, and that's what scares people. Oh, this one, authenticity is the new bullshit. You know, I don't know, anybody watch American beer commercials? They're all authentic now. It drives me crazy, because it's the same stuff in the same factories. Authenticity has to be authenticity just doesn't happen automatically. It has to be completely reinvented and completely. This year's authenticity is next year's bullshit. Authenticity means always having to reinvent language, reinvent yourself, reinvent your product, reinvent, or else even authenticity becomes meaningless after a while.
So we went over the 2 minutes by slide, as usual. So I'm going to go straight to the end, and we'll be posting what the 3 that we won't say through our Twitter feed, so you can follow us on that one. Yeah. So to close, do something that matters. Do something that matters. Whether people want to do something that matters, whether they're consumers or whether we're selling to them. The thing is, we're only alive once. And if we're going to be in advertising or whatever job we choose, we have to make sure that our brands matter, the work we do that matters, the things we communicate matter, and especially our customers and audience matter.
But surely this is about selling.
Excuse me?
It's about selling. Advertising matters because it pays for my TV shows. It pays for me to watch the best shows that I want to watch. That's why it matters.
See, I think it's actually, what matters is all about what you're doing inside your company, that it starts on the inside and then flows out. Because if people care passionately about what they're doing every day and they're really connected to their work, then you're able to embrace an audience and a market in a way that's completely different and really authentic.
I agree.
That's
authentic.
If you're just trying to sell stuff, no, but seriously, if you're just trying to sell stuff and you've got all this data, all this content, all these things you're pushing out, if you don't believe that you're part of something bigger that's going to really mean something over time.
If you don't believe in what you're doing, you're going to find it very hard to compete with people who do.
Exactly.
Amen.
Sorry, Tony Robbins.
So at the end, I think we've talked a lot about content, data, meaningful connections, but I think that when we talked about Transmedia in the beginning, it's all about this. It's all about doing something that matters across every single activity that you do and across every single platform. So thank you very much.